Hello and welcome back. Or if you are new around these parts, my name is Rachel. I'm the woman behind Beautiful Budget. My mission is to help women manage their money with fulfillment and wealth building in mind. Today, I want to talk about some of the major changes to our household budget that came about when I took Beautiful Budget full-time just a handful of months ago. Because if it isn't stressful and scary enough to take your business full-time, you also got all of these, personal and family finance implications with all of it. It is just wonderful. And so I'm hoping laying all of this out and talking about it can help to educate you if you're considering this transition for yourself, or maybe you're going through it now, or you've already gone through it previously. And, there's kind of this sisterhood here of, we've both had to navigate this and it's not exactly easy. So I hope you'll say hello. There's nothing like female entrepreneurs getting to know each other, supporting each other, and I'm always looking to build that network. But before I even get into some of these big changes to our budget, I want to kind of give some context where I was, how things were financially when I made the switch. So I took Beautiful Budget full-time in October of 2021, and for the 6 months leading up to that, I actually worked for a cybersecurity startup. And my role was essentially technical writer, but I also had quite a bit of content creation that I would do for this position. And the formal title was product education specialist. So I, created videos, did voiceovers, really just trying to educate people on our key product, and loved that job. It was fully remote and my salary was $90,000 a year. So of course I was happy to be in tech and be in this kind of booming industry. I had cybersecurity experience from when I was in the Air Force, but just prior to the product education specialist role, I was a high school math teacher. So you can imagine going from teacher to this tech gig was a nice pay jump. So that was pretty great. We had gotten accustomed to, pretty nice living, right? Being able to travel. We actually purchased our home just a few months prior to me taking the business full time, and lots of big things were happening. We moved from Texas to Florida, just living great. But I always kind of knew that I would end up taking my business full time. I think somewhere along the way, really like a couple of years ago, I had just kind of set this goal in mind, set this number in mind of I want to take the business full time by 2025. And that's just kind of what I, planted in the ground and said, that's it. If I can do that, that would be incredible. Well, when I launched the Beautiful Budget Workbook in July of last year, the response to it was absolutely incredible, beyond what I could have dreamed. And it enabled me to really start thinking about the switch much sooner and nailing down the numbers and saying, okay, when is it time to press that button? When is it time to sit down with my boss in a Google Meet session and let her know, hey, I think it's time to take this other pursuit all the way and just see what happens. Of course, she knew about this kind of side gig, side project. I was very transparent about that in the application process and everything. So that wasn't a tough conversation when I did end up putting in my resignation letter, but it was crucial for us to know when is the right time. We knew we couldn't get the timing perfect probably, and there was always going to be risk, but how do we make it to where this isn't terrifying? Okay, we can tolerate scary, but terrifying, let's try to avoid that. So there was a lot of number crunching right there around September, October. I was seeing, the numbers for the workbook sales and, needing to order more and keep inventory and looking at my, business account. And I would just have copy paper, just jotting down okay, if this happens and this happens and, this income comes here and I launched the course. So I was doing all of these different, kind of scenario walkthroughs of, is this going to work? Is this going to be okay? And I looked at our budget, and one of the first things that I did was say, well, what do I need to earn from Beautiful Budget? What does my take-home pay need to be to where we can keep our standard of living, similar, to where we can still travel, to where we can still do fun things with the kids on the weekends and, go go to nice restaurants occasionally and, furnish the house the way that we would love to. How can I make that happen? The number that I landed at was $5,000 a month. So going from $90,000 a year, but that was gross, so keep that in mind, to $60,000 take home from Beautiful Budget. Honestly, trying to figure out gross pay when you're a business owner, like it is the most advanced math problem that I've ever encountered. And it honestly gave me a headache. The taxes are just so intricate. And I knew that I was going to be going from sole proprietorship to, filing as an S-Corp. So it was really hard for me to determine, well, what does this equate to in gross pay? I finally just kind of gave up in needing to know that number because, again, I knew that I needed to pay myself $5,000 a month. And that was it. That was a number. So again, just kind of looking at everything day after day, praying on it, really sleeping on it, making sure that it felt right. Because I wanted to have that good gut feeling, but even more so, is it going to be sustainable financially? So to be completely transparent, when we were just days away from me putting in my resignation letter, when you looked at my business checking and you looked at what we had in kind of our household savings, there was about 3 months of expenses saved across all of that. 3 months. So I'm probably not the exemplar to kind of follow when it comes to the amount of savings that you have when you do something like this. But I had the comfort, I had the privilege of, my husband working in tech, very promising, skills, again, booming industry, and I was privileged in that. I didn't have to sweat it so much. It's not just me. So yes, I realize that not everybody gets that. And certainly if it's you budgeting by yourself and you're thinking about pressing the button and becoming fully self-employed, 9 months to a year really is the much better predicament to be in as opposed to just a few months. But we did it. I put in my resignation letter. October 12th was my last day, and it was e-course creation full speed ahead. But kind of going back, and I'll really elaborate more on this first point because this is the first of the 5 that I want to highlight, and that is the pay cut. So going from the $90,000 gross to the $60,000 take home. But here's something really important that I want to note, which is I didn't go from a fixed income to a variable income in terms of our budget. My pay then and my pay now remains fixed. For all my budget knows, I have a very predictable paycheck, extremely consistent. It sees the same figures every single time. So I get that question a lot from people who are entrepreneurs or they're, considering becoming fully self-employed, and they're very worried about budgeting with variable income. And, the response I give, it used to be kind of this elaborate response of, here, you need to set this up and calculate these numbers and budget off the minimum. I've kind of gotten to the point where I say, look, you make variable income, you need to make it such that it's not variable. And I kind of get this look like, what? Are you mocking me? No. And it's not that. It's not that I'm, claiming that you have it wrong. Actually, your pay is fixed. You've got to find a way to go from, hey, my pay fluctuates, to what my budget sees is the same amount of money each time. So just want to highlight there that I didn't go from fixed to variable. My pay remains fixed in the eyes of my budget, but that was a big change in terms of going from $90,000 gross to $60,000 a year in take-home pay. Now, I keep mentioning this S-Corp side of things. So I mentioned how at the turn of the year, I filed as an S-Corp, and there was a lot of number crunching involved in that decision too. You kind of reach a point where, your revenue and your profits are such that you can, comfortably pay yourself wages, and it starts to become more favorable tax-wise to file as an S-Corp. So I had kind of reached that point late last year and pulled the plug and decided, starting with calendar year 2022, I will file as an S-Corp. As part of that transition, I took another pay cut, but not really, going from $60,000, that $5,000 a month take home, to now, if you were to go and look in my Gusto profile, and Gusto is a system I use to run payroll, to basically pay myself as an employee of Beautiful Budget LLC. If you were to look at that platform, you would see that my annual salary is $50,000 a year. When you become an S-Corp, you have to, or when you file as an S-Corp, you've got to determine how much am I going to pay myself in wages? And you need to pay yourself a reasonable salary. But you don't want to pay yourself as much as possible in wages because, again, when we want to look at, favorable tax circumstances, that always comes into play. You want your wages to be reasonable, reasonable when compared to somebody else in your field that doesn't own their own business. What would they earn per year? And then on top of that, you can pay yourself distributions, and those are taxed differently. But that was a big piece. And that's the second thing I'm highlighting, is that going from sole proprietorship to filing as an S-Corp meant that I now had to run payroll. I now had to go into this, Gusto platform, and not sponsored, but I use Gusto, and it's been great so far, to, twice a month going in there and saying, all right, run payroll. And it's awesome. It breaks down for you like what the gross pay is to the employee, me, what the taxes are on the employee side and on the employer side. It's very kind of easy to follow in that way, but I do that twice a month. And then I also have to pay myself owner's distributions. So it's a much more elaborate process when I became self-employed and started filing as an S-Corp, as opposed to, when I was working at the tech startup, I would just sit back and, you're going to get paid on payday. Like, you don't even think about it. Oh, it's payday. Okay. And your pay comes in, it's direct deposited. Even as a sole proprietorship, you can set up like an automatic transfer of whatever amount you choose. And, that's pretty straightforward. But that's totally different. That's totally new, having to go in and, pay my wages. My wages are only a fraction of the site picture. So when I write my budget, typically, if you see me go through it, you're just going to see me write $2,500. In reality, when I am sitting down and working our budget and it's like the full version, what you see is that there's a paycheck, the wages that I pay myself within the Gusto system running payroll. There's also an owner's distribution to myself that I pay, and I do that twice a month, and also contribute to my new 401k, which brings me to point number 3. Rather than having money directly taken out of my paychecks like I did when I was a W-2 employee at the startup, rather than having that come out directly and go into a traditional or a Roth 401k, being self-employed and the fact that it's just me meant that I could pursue a solo 401k. So I set one of these up in October, and I started contributing money to it directly from my business checking account. So that means that there's kind of 3 things here. There's payroll to myself, there's the owner's distribution, and then going into my checking account, actually going into my solo 401k account and directing that retirement contribution each time. And solo 401ks, they have the employer side and the employee side. So yeah, I could probably do a whole video on just solo 401ks, but that's new. I am now kind of in control of what the payments look like, how often. So that was the third thing. Number 4, what we typically see in, like a salaried position is maybe at the end of the year, there's an opportunity for a bonus, something like that. This was now something that if I was going to receive a bonus, it was just going to be basically an extra payout from my business checking account, which would basically be considered another owner distribution like I've been describing. And you want to be careful, because if you are paying yourself in distributions, so, in large amounts, and they like exceed your wages, you're going to be like a huge red flag for the IRS. But there's kind of this sweet spot that you can arrive at working with your CPA to figure out, okay, what is this reasonable salary? Because the IRS won't tell you. What is this reasonable, salary I should pay myself? And then if I do this much in distributions, do you think that would be cause for concern in the IRS's eyes? Like, hey, we need to audit this chick. What is she doing down there, right? So those bonuses, rather than being calculated by the employer or coming in a certain tempo, for my husband, it's quarterly, and it's a consistent, predictable thing. And he can calculate with pretty good precision, pretty good accuracy, what the amount is going to be. For me, if revenue, was way up, profits were way up, and there's definitely some wiggle room there to pay myself a bonus, then, cross that bridge when we get there. We haven't gotten to that point where I would, pay myself a bonus outside of how my pay is already structured. But again, that would be something that's handled much differently. And in terms of our budget, it would mean that I would have that full control of, when and how much. And the last thing that really kind of switched up when I became fully self-employed was just kind of our money flow. We went from really taking the approach of, we have both of our incomes and we flow that through our budget template, and that's what it is. When I became self-employed, it actually kind of prompted this approach of we're going to live off of part of my husband's salary, and then, a chunk of his and all of mine will be put towards saving and investing. This was, lucrative for us because it kind of took that pressure off of me of earning six figures or earning a certain amount so that our budget continued to look a certain way. I kind of had that pressure taken off, and just kind of knowing, well, what I bring in is contributed towards saving and investing. If it had to be cut out of the budget, it gets definitely unfortunate and it alters when we're going to meet our financial goals, but it's not backbreaking. It's not that we're not going to be able to have a roof over our heads or, feed the family or cover insurance costs or whatever. So it really prompted a change in how we approach kind of our money flow. So we actually ended up setting up a different account that my paychecks are direct deposited into, and then my husband's goes into the joint checking account, and that kind of flows as you kind of normally see me demonstrate over on Instagram. It's now kind of the pay is kind of going in two different directions and doing different things, which is much more organized, I'll say that. And it's kind of prompting us to really maximize the dollars that we invest. And even when I was bringing in more for my tech position, we weren't investing that much and saving that much. So it was kind of just that catalyst for let's take a different approach. But I will say I've kind of got it figured out for now. I'm definitely much more organized now, and I've kind of got a system going of the different, money flows and keeping the budget going. I've been able to keep my pay consistent the whole time. And at the end of the day, I'm grateful for how it's changed our budget, because it does mean that there's this element of it could go beyond, the money that I bring in and how I contribute to our household budget isn't, capped by what my employer deems is my salary. It is going to be dictated by, okay, here are my wages. If I want to pay myself extra, it looks like this. And so I've kind of taken that cap off, which is really exciting. And it kind of drives me to continue to be better, reach the next level, and be the best entrepreneur that I can be. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to give it a like and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this one, and I will see you next time.